With the first pick of the ultimate mock draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Travon Walker, defensive end from the University of Georgia. How this helps the Jaguars right now is this. They got the guy with the highest athletic profile, the best measurables, and I believe the best long-term ceiling for helping this franchise. That's what you have to do when you take the very first pick. You have to get the guy who projects to be the best a year or two from now, not the guy who actually has the most stats in college. On tape, he definitely shows the ability to rush the passer and to have all the attributes that Trent Baalke really does like. Now, he didn't have as many splash plays as a lot of the other edge rushers. He didn't have the stats. And some people say, well, he had really good teammates. Well, maybe because he had really good teammates, he didn't get a lot of stats, if you want to reverse it and look at it in a different way. Travon Walker has tremendous upside, and the Jaguars aren't going to ask him to do what he was asked to do at Georgia. They're probably going to turn him loose and do a little bit more. Think about it like this. Jermaine Johnson, who I believe is also a very good player, didn't have a lot of stats before this season either, and that's why he transferred from the University of Georgia to go to Florida State. I look at Travon Walker as a guy the Jaguars think has a higher ceiling than any other edge and has a more consistent base to go from in terms of all of the things that he was able to do in college. So Travon Walker is the pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars in the 2022 draft.
With the second pick of the Ultimate Mock Draft here on the Locked On Podcast Network, the Detroit Lions select edge defensive end Aiden Hutchinson from the University of Michigan. If this happens and Hutchinson does not get selected by the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Lions they're running this card up to the podium and to Roger Goodell. This is exactly what Detroit needs. They need speed off the edge. They need a sack man. They need to get to the quarterback. The Lions have struggled over the last few years, especially with Trey Flowers' injury over the last couple of years, of getting to the quarterback. And now this solves a big issue for them, landing Hutchinson at number 2. Plus, remember, he's a local kid, grew up in Detroit, went to Michigan, tons of Wolverine fans in the area, including Lions ownership, Sheila Hamp and her husband Steve, who live in Ann Arbor, right in Aiden Hutchinson's backyard. This is a no-brainer pick for the Lions, getting Hutchinson at number 2. So that's the pick for the Lions. Don't forget to keep it tuned to Locked On Lions on all platforms, wherever you get your podcasts, for all your best draft updates and needs on the Detroit Lions, your team, every day. Locked On Lions.
What's going on, everybody? I'm John Hickman with the Locked On Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Houston Texans sit at number 3. You heard the first 2 selections. I'm running down to the podium. I got the pick in my hand. With my draft selection, the Houston Texans will select Ahmad Sauce Gardner. The Houston Texans have not had a prominent number 1 cornerback since the days of Jonathan Joseph. Houston did a very good job with re-signing Desmond King, and even with Lonnie Johnson showing some promise at the end of the season, Houston still faces a problem. There's no definitive number 1 cornerback on this roster. They can solve that with drafting Sauce Gardner. He has not allowed a touchdown in his collegiate career. And the best thing about him is he's a dog on the field, but he does not come in any trouble off the field, which matches what the Houston Texans love in their players. I suspect that he can come in day one and be a huge benefit to this defense.
With the 4th pick of the Ultimate Mock Draft, the New York Jets select Kayvon Thibodeau, defensive end, Oregon. Robert Saleh's defense is all about generating pressure from the front 4. Now, the Jets are getting Carl Lawson back this season. Lawson was the big free agent signing on the defensive side of the ball for the team in 2021. He missed his entire first season with the Jets because of an injury he suffered at a joint preseason practice with the Green Bay Packers. But the defensive end spot across from Lawson is kind of unclear right now. John Franklin Myers filled the role for much of the 2021 season, but he's a big 290, 300-pound kind of guy. He might be best served sliding inside and playing defensive tackle, especially on passing downs. This is where Thibodeau comes in. He will be the bookend pass rusher to Carl Lawson. For much of the 2021 season, he was viewed as the consensus number 1 overall pick in this draft, so a really good value for the Jets at 4th overall. And now on passing downs, the Jets will have Lawson. They will have the 2019 3rd overall pick, Quinnen Williams. They'll have Franklin Myers, and they'll have Thibodeau. They'll be able to generate pressure on the quarterback by rushing their front 4. For more Jets draft coverage, find the Locked On Jets podcast, free and available on all platforms. part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The New York Giants complete their offensive line rebuild in the Locked On NFL Network's mock draft. Hi, everybody. Patricia Traina, host of the Locked On Giants podcast. And in the Locked On NFL Network's mock draft at pick number 5, I have the New York Giants taking Alabama offensive tackle Evan Neal. Evan Neal, in my opinion, one of the most complete offensive tackles in this draft. The New York Giants put a lot of emphasis in free agency on rebuilding that offensive line, making it better so that quarterback Daniel Jones, running back Saquon Barkley, and the rest of the offensive skilled playmakers can finally get on track. Will the Giants keep pick number 7? I've got it on the block right now. We'll see if we get any offers. Stay tuned. Giants are on the clock as of now, coming up in 2 picks, but they may be on the move.
With the 6th pick of the ultimate mock draft, the Carolina Panthers select Malik Willis, quarterback, Liberty University. Why did the Panthers make this decision? How does it impact their team? Well, it's quite simple. The Carolina Panthers have been the thirstiest, most desperate team in the football league over the last 2 off seasons, trying to find a franchise quarterback. They hope that Malik Willis can be that. Sitting there at 6, general manager Scott Fitterer has said multiple times that's a time where you take a shot at a potential franchise quarterback, and financially, getting someone on a rookie scale pay wage makes the most sense opposed to trying to spend multi-million dollars on guys like Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield who aren't the answer potentially long-term for the Carolina Panthers. And the hope is that maybe Malik Willis will be. Now, for me, I don't think that Willis, Pickett, or any of the quarterbacks in this upcoming draft class are actually going to be worth the 6th pick, or franchise quarterbacks for the Carolina Panthers have to find someone for at least the hope that Scott Fitterer, the general manager, can keep his job long-term. Matt Rule, he's cooked either way. So maybe Malik Willis can offer a brighter day for Scott Fitterer and whoever the next head coach is of the Carolina Panthers this time next year. For more Carolina Panthers draft coverage, find the Locked On Panthers podcast, free and available on all platforms, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 7th pick of the ultimate mock draft, the New York Giants select Jermaine Johnson, edge, Florida State. You want versatility in an edge rusher? Johnson has it. He's played with his hand in the dirt. He's lined up over the tackle. He's rushed off the edge, and he's dropped back into coverage. Johnson is a classic Swiss Army knife that can do a lot of things well, that create nightmares for opposing offenses. And it doesn't matter what side of the field we're talking about, because Johnson has played both halves of the field equally well. With a player like Johnson on the defense, the possibilities for new Giants defensive coordinator Wink Martindale are both exciting and endless, thanks to the rookie's versatility. And at pick number 7 overall, we're talking outstanding value. For more Giants draft coverage, find the Locked On Giants podcast, free and available on all platforms. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 8th pick in the ultimate mock draft, the Atlanta Falcons select Ike Mekwonu, offensive lineman from NC State. Gone are the days of Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and Calvin Ridley, where the Falcons had a high-flying pass-first attack. It's now about establishing a more physical, run-first identity in Atlanta, and there's no player in this 2022 draft class that embodies that more than Ike Mekwonu. He's one of the best run-blocking offensive linemen we've seen in recent memory. He also offers positional flexibility, having experience playing both guard and tackle, which mean he can immediately slide in and upgrade the physicality of what has been a lackluster Falcons offensive line in recent years that has been far too often the side of the ball that has been punished in the trenches. And with Mekwonu, the Falcons now have a player that can potentially flip that script and truly does embody that physical punishing physical identity. For more Falcons draft coverage, follow Locked On Falcons podcast, free and available on all podcast platforms, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 9th pick in the ultimate mock draft, the Seattle Seahawks select Devin Lloyd, linebacker out of Utah. After losing Russell Wilson this offseason and with only 3 tackles currently on the roster, the Seahawks have a number of needs they could address with their top 10 pick acquired in the Wilson trade to the Broncos. But even after picking Jordan Brooks in the first round 2 years ago, they have to find a player to replace Bobby Wagner, And Devin Lloyd is the perfect fit to do that. He's proficient in coverage. 3 of his 5 interceptions at the University of Utah were returned for touchdowns. He also produced 43 tackles for loss and 15.5 sacks. So he is a rare modern-day off-ball linebacker that can do everything. He's great in coverage. He's disruptive at the line of scrimmage and can blow up run plays. You can even have him rush off the edge like a defensive end in certain packages. Not many off-ball linebackers can do that, considering how teams like the Rams have torched the Seahawks with crossers in the middle of the field over the years. Bringing in an athletic linebacker like Lloyd that has great ball skills and instincts in coverage and also can be a game wrecker against the run and chasing down quarterbacks. This is a no-brainer at number 9. Even if it isn't considered the biggest need on the roster at this point, they are getting a potential all-pro player at pick number 9. For all your latest Seahawks coverage, make sure to check out the Locked On Seahawks podcast on all major platforms. You can subscribe and listen 5 days a week for free. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 10th pick of the Ultimate Mock Draft, the New York Jets select Drake London, wide receiver, USC. The Jets need to improve their wide receiver room. Zach Wilson is entering his 2nd NFL season, and his first year in the league had a lot of struggles, so this team needs to do everything in its power to support the young quarterback and put him in a position to succeed. And right now, the group of receivers the Jets have just is not good enough. Yes, Elijah Moore showed promise as a rookie. Yes, Corey Davis has a decent NFL track record. Yes, Braxton Berrios is coming off a career year, but this team needs more. London brings a dimension the Jets don't have. He's a very good contested catch guy. He also fits the Jets' offense well because he's a big target on short passes. He's also tough to bring down in the open field. Joe Douglas has shown during his career, the general manager of the Jets, a propensity for favoring bigger receivers. Yes, if a guy's extremely fast like Elijah Moore or Tyreek Hill, who the Jets tried to trade for, he'll make exceptions, but generally I think the Jets want a bigger receiver, and London fits that description. For more Jets draft coverage, find the Locked On Jets podcast, free and available on all platforms. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 11th pick of the Ultimate Mock Draft, the Washington Commanders select Kyle Hamilton, safety, Notre Dame. Washington was near the bottom in every pass category on defense in the 2021 NFL season. Hamilton is not only the best safety in the draft, but he's arguably the best defensive back overall and a safer pick than LSU's Derek Stingley, who is still on the board. For more Commanders draft coverage, find the Locked On Commanders podcast, free and available on all platforms. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 12th pick of the Ultimate Mock Draft, the Minnesota Vikings select Derek Stingley Jr., cornerback out of LSU. Look, he's a sticky man, cover man. That is exactly what the Vikings need, and they need it in droves. They are currently, that cornerback room is a barren wasteland, so they absolutely have to get a cornerback. It's far and away the most dire need on the roster, so we're just going to address it. And honestly, Stingley's one of those guys I might have even thought about trading up for, but I didn't have to. He fell right into the Vikings' lap. So it was a pretty easy choice to slam him down. Now he's an LSU guy. He's going to get tutored by like Mr. DBU, which is Patrick Peterson, the guy who self-claimed to have started that trend at LSU, and he gets to go up against Justin Jefferson every day in practice. So it's a whole kind of go Tigers, skull, purple and gold thing going on, and I love that. But beyond that, he's just a really, really good player. His freshman tape was absolutely insane. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see a lot of him in the last 2 years. But even from what we did get to see of him, even though it wasn't quite as elite as it was in 2019, still very, very good. No reason for concern for me. So we're sending it. For more Vikings coverage, you can find the Locked On Vikings podcast free on all platforms. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And with the 13th overall pick of the 2022 NFL Draft, the Houston Texans select Chris Olave, wide receiver from Ohio State. Outside of improving the Texans secondary, another priority for this organization is making sure that they continue to build around Davis Mills. And what is the best way to build around the quarterback? To make sure that he has some quality wide receivers to throw to. Yes, the Houston Texans did have an opportunity to extend Brandon Cooks to a 2-year contract, but it's only for 2 years. For a guy like Davis Mills to continue to progress and continue to be the quarterback that we all are hoping to be, the next franchise quarterback for this organization, he's going to have to find a wide receiver to grow and develop with. Chris Olave is a wide receiver who has the potential to be this team's #1 overall wide receiver for the future, and pairing him alongside Davis Mills could possibly give this organization a second chance at having a prime quarterback with a prime wide receiver.
This is Kevin Ostreicher, the host of the Locked On Ravens podcast, and with the 14th overall selection in the 2022 Locked On NFL Mock Draft, the Baltimore Ravens select Charles Cross, offensive tackle from Mississippi State. Now, Cross represented the best player available on the board for the Ravens at number 14 at a position of need, so this was a pick that just had to be made for this team, and Cross played left tackle in the Bulldogs system at Mississippi State and played it very, very well. His strength is in pass protection, very athletic player, can really match moves and match counters from edge rushers that they put on to Cross. And while he doesn't necessarily have the most strength in the world, in the run game, he is still a very good run blocker, can be a very physical player, a run blocker there. But it still feels like the Ravens, with the uncertainty surrounding Ronnie Stanley's health, they need another option at the tackle position. And assuming Stanley does get healthy, they can ideally move Cross over to the right side and have bookend tackles once again with Cross and Ronnie Stanley that they haven't had since Orlando Brown departed last offseason for the Kansas City Chiefs after demanding a trade. So Cross being available for Baltimore at 14, is it realistic? It might not be, but if he's available at 14, the Ravens could run that card up very, very quickly. For more on the Baltimore Ravens and all the things happening surrounding the team, be sure to follow the Locked On Ravens podcast and subscribe on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Gino Camilleri here, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast, here to make the 15th overall selection in the 2022 Ultimate Mock Draft. And with that, the Philadelphia Eagles are proud to select cornerback out of Clemson, Andrew Booth Jr. 2 out of the 3 corner positions are cemented in Philadelphia, with perennial Pro Bowler Darius Slay taking the #1 spot on the outside, and one of the best young nickel corners in the league, Avonte Maddox, making his mark last season, getting a contract extension. But with Steven Nelson departing in free agency, there is a wide open race for that second corner position. Andrew Booth Jr., with his pure athleticism and his ability to play man-to-man coverage, would be an instant upgrade, and he would be the favorite to start outside of Darius Slay and Avonte Maddox. The Philadelphia Eagles break a nearly 2-decade-long streak and select a cornerback in the first round with Andrew Booth Jr., and they're proud to get a player in there that can match up with Darius Slay and Avonte Maddox. For more Philadelphia Eagles coverage, find the Locked On Eagles podcast for free and available on all platforms, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 16th selection of the Ultimate Mock Draft, the New Orleans Saints select Trevor Penning, offensive tackle out of Northern Iowa. After losing Teron Armstead to the Miami Dolphins this offseason, the New Orleans Saints have a big hole to fill on their offensive line at left tackle, the blindside protector for Jameis Winston for 2022. Now, the Saints could band-aid this situation with a player that they have a lot of confidence in James Hurst, but I'm choosing instead to go ahead and fill this role for the foreseeable future, or maybe even the right tackle role for the foreseeable future, as Trevor Penning did play at right tackle for over 500 snaps in 2020, which would allow the Saints to move Ryan Ramczyk to left tackle if they wanted to go that route. Trevor Penning gives you a unique combination of strength and flexibility, winning with leverage, but also performing extremely well in gap and zone schemes. The Saints a zone run heavy team, so he would fit right in as a plug and play option in 2022. For more on the New Orleans Saints and this year's NFL Draft, make sure you're following along with the Locked On Saints podcast, free and available on all platforms, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 17th pick in the Ultimate Mock Draft, the Los Angeles Chargers select Jameson Williams, wide receiver, Alabama. This is David Drugemeyer of the Locked On Chargers podcast, and Jameson Williams will impact this team right away with that explosive speed that the Chargers have desperately been looking for. He's a great route runner. He can really win with his quickness off the line of scrimmage. You just put the ball in his hands, and he can create. He can get those yards after catch. You do a bubble screen, a wide receiver screen, a swing pass, you get the ball in his hands,
and he has the ability to take it the distance. He's very, very dangerous, and that can open things up for the Chargers, who have great underneath options like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and also the ever-dangerous running back Austin Eckler. Jameson Williams could be that missing piece, that missing link that takes a top 5 offense to possibly the best offense in the NFL. But for more Chargers coverage, find the Locked On Chargers podcast, free and available on all platforms, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 18th overall pick in the 2022 Locked On Ultimate Mock Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select Ohio State wide receiver Garrett Wilson. The 3rd year in a row the Eagles select a wide receiver in the 1st round, the 4th year in a row that they take a pass catcher in the first 2 rounds. You could even say 5th year in a row with tight end Dallas Goedert back in 2018. Although they have Devontae Smith established as their wide receiver 1, Quez Watkins as a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3, they still need another piece for Jalen Hurts or whoever the next quarterback will be for the Eagles. And Garrett Wilson checks all the boxes: an explosive release, short and long-term speed down the field, can make contested catches, can play both in the slot and on the outside. He is an interchangeable receiver that I think would fit perfectly with Smith and Watkins, who both played a lot of inside and out last year. The Eagles don't technically go by an XYZ type of receiver set, but they do still need that 3rd passing target at the position, considering how much 11 personnel they do use moving forward. I personally think Wilson is the most complete and the best receiver in this class. He'd be my number 1 receiver off the board. The fact that we can get him here at 18th overall is just incredible value. I'm Louis DiBiase for Locked On Eagles. The Eagles take Garrett Wilson at 18 overall.
With the 19th selection in the Ultimate Mock Draft, the New Orleans Saints select Treylon Burks, wide receiver out of Arkansas. Traits, and more. Traits, height, weight, speed, whatever cliche you want to use, it applies to Burks because he gives you everything that NFL coaches love at the position. At 6'3", 225 pounds, he ran a 4.5 40, or in that 4.5 range, which is slower than people mostly expected. But if you look at the tape, once he gets past defenses, they're not catching him from behind. And with the return of Michael Thomas slated in 2022, it gives you an opportunity to put that big X-receiver-like frame that Burks carries over on the opposite side, giving him some one-on-one flanker situations that he'll be able to take advantage of, whether he's stacking defenders in order to create some separation or he's simply winning at the catch point. He gives you everything that you're looking for in a New Orleans Saints offense that is desperate for more explosiveness coming from that wide receiver room, and Burks gives you everything that you need. For more on the New Orleans Saints and this NFL draft class, make sure you follow along with the Locked On Saints podcast, free and available on all platforms, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
For the 20th overall selection of the 1st round of the NFL draft in 2022, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Jordan Davis, defensive tackle out of Georgia. Now, some may be thinking the Steelers, why aren't you going quarterback? Why aren't you trying to replace Ben Roethlisberger? Well, the Steelers are going to be all about defense in 2022, regardless of who they pick at quarterback this season. So why not get a defensive potential superstar who just fell to you in a ridiculous way? I really think that Jordan Davis won't be there at 20, but the way that this fell out with my fellow hosts on the Locked On Podcast Network, I couldn't pass him up. Not only would he be able to team up with Stephon Tuitt, who had 11 sacks the last time he played a full season in the NFL, and Cam Hayward, who's been an all-pro superstar defensive tackle, but he would be the guy that they'd be passing off the torch to. There's been a lot of great Steelers defensive linemen over the years, but Cam Hayward's in his early 30s, and Stephon Tuitt isn't far behind him. They need a new guy who can be a potential star at the position, who will be able to grow up with them, basically able to learn behind them, and become the next standout on the position to lead the Steelers defensive front in the coming years when their careers come to an end. Jordan Davis is also a freakish athlete that you can't pass up. At 6'6", running a 4.78 40-yard dash, showing extreme explosiveness in his broad jump, his vertical jump, his 10 and 20-yard splits. He's exactly the kind of athlete that you want to be a butt kicker on the Steelers defensive line. Would take them from being one of the worst rushing defense in 2021 and probably help them become one of the better rush defense units in the NFL in 2022. That'll solve a lot of problems and get them a lot of thoughts on longevity so that they don't have to be considering more defensive positions in the near future.
With the 21st pick in the 2022 Locked On Podcast Network's Ultimate NFL Mock Draft, the New England Patriots select linebacker Nakobe Dean out of the University of Georgia. Standing at only 5 feet 11 inches tall and questions surrounding his reach and his wingspan, Nakobe Dean may not exactly be your prototypical Patriots wide receiver. They usually like them a little bit bigger, a little bit more plodding in their playing style. However, for a defense that looked a step too slow and a bit long in the tooth last season, Dean is the perfect antidote. He has that sideline-to-sideline speed and that fluid movement that's going to make him an instant difference maker in both pass defense and also in the pass rush. But Dean's greatest asset is his ability to defend against the run. That's something that the Patriots have not had and had trouble with at the linebacker position in recent years. Dean plays downhill. He's very quick to pick up run plays. And in fact, he's what I like to call an RPO buster. He's just that good against the run. He was among the leading tacklers for the national champion Georgia Bulldogs last season, as well as in the nation, and he rarely misses tackles in the box. Bottom line, drafting Dean is a signal that the Patriots are willing to go against script in 2022 by getting younger and faster at the position. The Pats have a lot of needs that could have been addressed here, but speed at the linebacker position was definitely a big need, and they filled it with a potentially dynamic talent in Nakobe Dean. For more Patriots draft coverage, download, subscribe to, and follow the Locked On Patriots podcast, free and available on all platforms, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 22nd pick in the ultimate mock draft, the Seahawks select Desmond Ridder, quarterback from Cincinnati. The Seahawks have to replace Russell Wilson. They're seeking a quarterback for the first time in a decade. They finally get that opportunity at pick number 22, making a trade to move up with the Green Bay Packers, general manager John Schneider's former employer. And in the process, they're able to land a quarterback that they have fallen in love with during the pre-draft process. Ridder may be the most pro-ready signal caller in this year's draft class. And while he doesn't have a cannon for an arm compared to some of his peers in this group, he has great poise in the pocket. He has the ability to read through his progressions and understands how to read defenses. And he can throw receivers open with anticipation. He's got great athleticism on top of it, ran a 4.52 40-yard dash at the combine, can create damage with his legs while extending plays, both as a passer and going out as a runner. And so he's a perfect fit for what the Seahawks want under center. Had to give up both their second-round picks to move up to do it. But if you have the quarterback you want and he's available at this stage of the draft, you go up and you get that player. The Seahawks do that, and they hope they have a quarterback that can compete with Drew Lock to start on day one. For all of your Seahawks information, make sure to check out the Locked On Seahawks podcast on all major platforms. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 23rd pick of the ultimate mock draft, the Arizona Cardinals select guard Zion Johnson from Boston College. Zion Johnson is a player the Arizona Cardinals desperately need to make an immediate impact come week one of the 2022 season. The interior of the offensive line for the Arizona Cardinals was putrid at best for a large portion of the 2021 season. And people forget that if Kyler Murray isn't protected and Kyler Murray doesn't stay healthy, none of this works. When you have an all-pro center like Rodney Hudson and two bookends playing tackle like DJ Humphries and Kelvin Beachum, an infusion of young, immediate impact-making talent is exactly what the Arizona Cardinals need to take a huge step forward in the protection of Kyler Murray, which in turn yields him having more time to throw the ball, which in turn yields more points on the board. Sure, the Cardinals have some glaring needs elsewhere, whether it be edge rusher, wide receiver, or corner, but if Kyler Murray isn't protected, none of this works, and that's why Zion Johnson is the 23rd overall pick taken by the Arizona Cardinals. For more Arizona Cardinals coverage, find the Locked On Cardinals podcast, free and available on all platforms, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 24th pick in the ultimate mock draft, the Dallas Cowboys select Kenyon Green, offensive guard, Texas A&M. The Cowboys go into the first round of this year's draft hoping that one of these top wide receivers would have fallen to them, whether it be Olave, Williams, Burks. It did not pan out that way, and so the Cowboys had to go to their fallback plan, which was a nice landing spot at one of the two top offensive guards. Zion Johnson goes right before the Cowboys pick, and so the pick is very clearly and very obvious. Kenyon Green, an offensive tackle who played for Texas A&M, who will likely make the switch inside to guard, but may end up playing some tackle for them down the road in the future. It's a very clear spot, a stout, strong,
body driving offensive guard. It's a little bit different than what you've had at the position at left guard for the last few years. So I think it's an upgrade for the Cowboys. And at this point now, they're going to be searching for wide receiver to see exactly what's going to be available to them at 56, or maybe with a slight trade up to try to get someone who can make an impact for this team this year. For more on the Dallas Cowboys, make sure you check out the Locked On Cowboys podcast, which is free and available on all of your podcast platforms. And make sure you check out the Locked On NFL pod for all your news on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 25th pick of the Ultimate Mock Draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who traded with Buffalo to get back into the first round, take Devontae Wyatt, a defensive tackle from the University of Georgia. The Jaguars double dip with the Bulldogs after taking Trayvon Walker with the very first pick, have now taken his running mate, Devontae Wyatt, who will play a little three technique for Jacksonville. I have just taken the position that the Jaguars need to be great at one unit instead of spreading it all the way around, and you can't ever go wrong in the trenches. I'm just of the utmost belief that the Jaguars need to just improve their talent level across the team, regardless, even if it's unit by unit. So Trayvon Walker first, and now Devontae Wyatt, a three technique for the Jaguars with the 25th pick. And what this means is this: the Jaguars have now built their defensive line in a very, very positive way moving forward by taking the best player available. For more Jaguars draft coverage, find the Locked On Jaguars podcast, free and available on all platforms, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 26th pick of the 2022 Ultimate Mock Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Matt Corral, quarterback, Ole Miss. The board fell in a tough way for the Titans. The top 5 wide receivers, the top 2 interior offensive linemen, the top 4 offensive tackles were all off the board. So the Titans were faced with a choice here. Do you go for a defensive player at a position that you don't have a need? Do you reach for one of the offensive needs that you have? Or do you go with the future face of the franchise at quarterback? And that's exactly what I did with Matt Corral. It's a perfect fit for the player and a perfect fit for the team. Corral came from an RPO-heavy, zone read-heavy college offense at Ole Miss. So now he can sit behind Ryan Tannehill for a year, learn more about the NFL game, and get comfortable with the offense that he's going to lead. Ryan Tannehill is still the best option and a solid starter for the Titans in 2022, and it makes it easy to part ways with Tannehill and his contract in 2023 when you slide Matt Corral in, and this is where his impact is felt. When Corral does get on the field, he has an incredibly strong arm. All places on the field are available to him. He's got good accuracy and knows how to lead his wide receivers so that they can maximize yards after catchability. He also has great mobility, incredible pocket movement, does a really good job navigating the pressure as well. He needs to tone down his aggressiveness, but once he does, the Titans could have an electric playmaker in Matt Corral. For more Tennessee Titans draft coverage, make sure that you find the Locked On Titans podcast, free and available on all platforms, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 27th pick of the Ultimate Mock Draft, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Jahan Dotson, wide receiver, Penn State University.
Yeah, with Chris Godwin's ACL recovery going well, but without a hard timeline as to when he is going to be ready for full football activity, it's imperative that the Buccaneers field an offensive unit capable of giving Tom Brady as many weapons as possible to put together wins while they await his return.
The team realized last season that they had a glaring deficiency in wide receiver depth once Godwin went out and Antonio Brown unceremoniously left the team. So adding Dotson here affords Tampa Bay the opportunity to prepare a fully stocked group for the early part of the 2022 regular season if Godwin isn't yet back to 100%, and sets the offense up to become even more dangerous when he returns.
For more Buccaneers draft coverage, find the Locked On Bucs podcast, free and available on all platforms, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 28th pick in the Ultimate Mock Draft, the Green Bay Packers select George Pickens. And Pickens is the reason I felt comfortable trading out of 22 with the top 5 guys, the big 5 receivers off the board. I felt like Pickens would be there at 28, and then I can pick up value at the top of the second round where I can address some other needs. I was happy to take George Pickens at this spot. One of the few players in this draft, despite not being in the quote-unquote big 5, he is one of the few guys who can be a true X receiver in the NFL. At 6'3", 195 with 4.4 speed, he can make plays down the field and he can make plays underneath with his size, his reliability, his body control, and his ability to make adversity plays. He could get better as a route runner, particularly at the top of his drop and getting off press, but he has the most upside, I think, in this class, because right now where he is already so good. He had the best drop rate of the top receivers in this draft. He's reliable. He could come in right away and play a role as a downfield receiver while he figures out the nuances of the game. I think this is a no-brainer selection for a guy who, by the way, is still a young player who came into the SEC at 18 years old and dominated guys, who has so much more potential to give.
With the 29th pick in the ultimate mock draft, the Kansas City Chiefs select Daxton Hill, cornerback, Michigan. With all of the high-quality edges off of the board, the Chiefs elect to bolster the back of their defense instead, getting a hybrid player that can start at the nickel, move into a robber role amongst their three safety set that the Chiefs do like to run, and provide a lot of value. They have a lot going for them, and right now you can find all of our draft coverage for the Kansas City Chiefs on Locked On Chiefs. They're available on all platforms, including YouTube, for free. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 30th pick in the ultimate mock draft, the Vikings trade up and select Trent McDuffie, cornerback out of Washington. Look, when I selected Derek Stingley at pick 12, I told you we needed corners. We need corners, plural. So I'm forcing the issue here, all right? I am sick of talking myself into Holton Hills and Chris Boyd's and Cordrea Tankersley's. It's time to just go get a guy that's going to be the guy. And look, Trent McDuffie, a lot of people say he needs to slot into the nickel. I don't know if he necessarily needs to. I think he can maybe rotate between the nickel and outside, depending on need and depending on how Patrick Peterson is and depending on if Derek Stingley is the guy we think he is and all that stuff. Make that a decision you make in camp. I'm just getting dudes in the building. He's smaller than you wish he was, and that's kind of the only downside with him. He's heady. He's going to understand the defense. He's going to be able to sort of he's going to be able to play a lot of roles. He's going to be able to read defenses. He's going to be able to read quarterbacks, click and close, and all that stuff. He plays a much different style than the other cornerback that I got here, and that is a good thing. That versatility and that variety in skill sets is something that I'm looking to give Ed Donatel for that Vic Fangio defense. So I double dipped on corners. I traded up. The price was picks 46, 77, and 156 to move up to pick 30, which works out on all the charts. So that is the trade up, and I decided to get aggressive and fix the damn defense. For more on all of this and more Vikings coverage, you can find the Locked On Vikings podcast free and available on all platforms. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 31st pick in the ultimate mock draft, the Cincinnati Bengals select Tyler Linderbaum, center from Iowa. Hi again, everyone. I'm James Rapine from the Locked On Bengals podcast, and my co-host Jake Lisco and I, well, we debated about this pick a lot and ultimately settled on Tyler Linderbaum because we feel like he's one of the best players in this draft, one of the best offensive linemen in this draft class, and the fact that he's still available at 31, it was an absolute no-brainer at the end of the day. But that didn't mean that we did not consider drafting George Karlaftis, the defensive end out of Purdue. The Bengals could absolutely use another edge rusher, but ultimately protecting Joe Burrow, the decision to protect Joe Burrow and invest even more resources in the offensive line, well, it won out. Kyer Elam also got some consideration, but Linderbaum, his athleticism, his ability to make a difference in the run game, he's a nasty offensive lineman, and I know there are some concerns about his arms, in a 31-inch arms at the center position. But if you're the Bengals, you look at it, his athleticism, he's a special player, and I think he's going to be a day one starter. The Bengals complete their offensive line transformation by adding Tyler Linderbaum with the 31st overall pick. For more on the Bengals draft options, make sure you subscribe and check out the Locked On Bengals podcast, free and available on all platforms, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
With the 32nd pick in the Locked On Ultimate Mock Draft, the Detroit Lions select safety Lewis Cine out of Georgia. This is a no-brainer for Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. They need some size and speed on the back end of that defense in the secondary, which was picked on a lot last year. Adding a playmaker like Lewis Cine who many feel is as good a safety as there is in this draft, even as good as Dax Hill or Kyle Hamilton, for the Lions to get him at 32 would definitely be a home run. Remember, Tracy Walker was re-signed, yes, and they got Deshaun Elliott on a one-year deal. But to get Lewis Cine in the first round and have him be a part of that safety rotation, where at times Aaron Glenn's defense has 3 safeties on the field, would be big. Lewis Cine would be a huge addition for the Lions with this defense, a defense that in our mock draft already has picked up Aiden Hutchinson and now Lewis Cine. For more on the draft, check out Locked On Lions on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.